on, you bastard!
Brought to you by JP Fans, helping you import old and new figures from Japan with care and ease. With that said, as per usual, all opinions included within this review are my own and not influenced by the fact I received this from said service. People often shunt Energon into a corner and forget about it, especially in the face of the other two way more popular Unicron Trilogy toy lines and shows. It's difficult to discern whether this deliberate ignorance is valid or not, because a lot of it comes from a very different time in the fandom. The 2000s wasn't the same collecting space as it is now, outside of a couple of cases. There wasn't a lot of tempered analysis. Rage fueled the machine, so when a toy line was just perceived as okay, indifference got turned into rage. Now, unfortunately, I can never have a complete view on how the line actually did. My introduction was during the 2007 movie release window, so I don't have the perspective of being a kid in the franchise anytime prior to that. I can provide insight into things like Power Core Combiners or animated, but not particularly anything 2006 and earlier. I can, however, engage with the toys that released at the time and provide a fresh modern perspective. Whenever I go back to this toy line, messing with figures and discovering the play patterns, I can't help but wonder if the hate was overblown. I'll never have a full answer, I was never there, and that puts me at an outside perspective. But I can appreciate what it's doing, especially since it was so far removed from what we know today. Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to the Energon Combaticons and their combined form, Bruticus Maximus. Kind of. See, because of the opportunity afforded to me, much like the last proxy service I worked with, these are the Takara Superlink versions. But I mean, hey, I'm not complaining. This is a figure I wanted for ages anyway, in this specific format, and I was always hoping to review it someday regardless. This just helped it happen a lot sooner, which is a pleasant surprise for this year's review lineup. A big thing folks tend to complain about these days is the shrinking of size classes. As inflation rises, figures get smaller and yet still more expensive. So obviously these guys would have to be huge, right? Yeah, no. Turns out these figures are formed from 4 Scout-sized Energon class toys. Basically, well, basics, and 1 deluxe-ish member under the combat class line. Gotta admit, it's kinda crazy they were able to pull off essentially a triple changer at deluxe scale years before Classics Astro Train and Universe Octane dropped. No wonder they initially thought deluxe triple changes would be a good idea. Now, while these are specifically the Takara versions, I'm going to refer to them by their Hasbro names for one simple reason. I kinda prefer the Western names, as these paint this set as another set of Combaticons for me, as opposed to a straight G1 homage. It's the same reason I don't vibe as much with the Revenge of the Fallen version. I just like this better as its own thing, and the name uses, although a bit derivative at times, just seem more interesting to me. But if you prefer to call them by their Takara G1 inspired names, they're basically all the same, aside from Vortex going by Vorta, which seems to be the more common name for him in Japan.
Vorta, put your homages away, Vorta. I'm not going for G1 right now, Vorta.
Anyway, enough overblown preamble. 2 pages and we're still not at the figures themselves. Probably should stop rambling. Guess we should jump into the limbs first, maybe starting with the land component. Kickback, no relation to the Insecticon, is the brawler-like of the set, and he's rather nice in tank mode. It's sort of one of those big trucks with the giant f***off guns on the top that were pretty common in the 2000s. Perhaps a way to avoid doing super realistic tanks for the Kiddlywinks. Oh, what the late 2000s would bring. Rather than go for a muted army green, Takara's opted to turn the saturation up quite a lot, and it's really quite something. It's toyetic, but in a really good way. The details that dot it along its chassis are all really cool. The lime highlights do a wonderful job creating visual interest, and I adore the black tread sculpted on the bottom. It's nice that they leverage the fact they're kibbled to ensure there's no unsightly gaps or anything. You even get a wee bit of silver at the front surrounding the 2 combiner pegs that double as extra guns. Really cool way to integrate necessary joint parts. Though the turret does so less deftly with the way this transforms, I can see why it's the way it is, but it's still a bit unwieldy. The head cover is clearly just chilling there on the front, and although the hidden side guns try to blend it in better, they don't particularly succeed. I don't mind it though, given this is basically a scout class figure. Like, ignore for a second that he has to combine, he's still doing a lot with a little, doubly so for a figure from 2004. Slack can easily be cut, and at least it's better than SS86 Megatron, even ignoring the price point difference of the two. I think it's the fact that it's able to sit and rotate a lot further back that makes it get away with a lot. And And even then, a lot of your attention is drawn to the cannons anyway, which are sculpted and painted beautifully. While the salient feature is obviously the orange tips, I personally find much more adoration with the subtle spray effect that tapers off to the base. It just makes this feel slightly more premium while still standing firmly in the "this is a toy" playbox. This is a pretty cool tank mode, especially for something that would have been 15 Australian at the time, or potentially less. And even at that price point, they still managed to cram in a bunch of extra gimmicks. Of course, there's the big theme of the toy line. No, not that one, the other one. The front of the tank has this gorgeous metallic port that can house an included Energon star, cast in a gorgeous transparent dark blue. Returning channel viewers will recognize these as the scoring system I use for my reviews. Fun fact, when I came up with this idea, I'd never actually held an Energon star before. Reviewing this kind of makes things seem a bit full circle now, which is cool. And on top of that, you can also add the Combiner Kibble on top to give him even more guns. With this, he's decked out in a whopping 12 guns. And you even still get full access to the articulation. It also helps hide the messiness of the arms and keeps everything a lot more locked in. Not that it's loose with it removed. I kinda wish it was opaque plastic to better fit with the rest of the aesthetic. In fact, I prefer if the Combiner stuff didn't use clear plastic because it's load bearing and just asking for breakage issues. Even me, a Sunbow Baby Blue hater, can see this is a bad idea. But it's still a really cool way to integrate the Combiner Kibble, honestly way cooler than the hand-foot gun bullshit we got in Combiner Wars. And if that wasn't crazy enough, you even get a mini-con port at the back of the radar dish for reasons. This is certainly a thing. Kibble or no kibble though, this is a wonderful tank mode. I don't really have many gripes, to be honest. The closest I get is how the arrow and number tamper graphing looks a bit messy on top of the existing detail. But they still went to all that trouble to begin with. It's hardly that big of an annoyance, and you're still left with a mode that's remarkably fun and wonderfully detailed. This set already seems to be off to a good start. I sure can't wait to see what the next member looks like. Huh. That's... yeah, it's sometimes a bit difficult to see when combined, but this set doesn't feature 5 bespoke molds, but rather 3, with 2 redecos filling out the ranks. Initially, I assumed this was a design limitation, as the Takara designers hadn't particularly tackled traditional gestalts in quite a while. The last major release, being Robots in Disguise Ruination, was just a reissue of the old G1 figures, and before that, they'd done very different styles of combination, so I thought it made sense getting back into the groove of things and all. Turns out, no, it's purely a budgetary decision. Corporate gave them a research and development budget of 9 to 10 molds, and instead of 2 teams of 5 each, they went with 3 teams of 3. Classic Aaron Archer? It's probably not actually his fault. By the way, y'all should totally check out the artwork he's been doing since he left Hasbro. He's been doing great stuff. Fortunately, these are, of course, Scramble City compatible, so you can swap whichever members out if you so desire. Though, unfortunately, the only combiner to make use of this with retool compatibility was the 4th most expensive combiner on the planet. After that, and either of those two.
Don't forget me!
Now, once you get over this, it's not too big of an issue. It's a quirk of the time. If you're already able to get over the lack of elbows, you can easily get over this. What I find more difficult to get over, however, is the deco they chose for Kickback's mold mates. Being the Swindle conduit, Blight goes for a much lighter shade, but they don't particularly commit to it. Despite the Takara set using the G1 names, this one takes a significant departure from the G1 deco with this sort of sickly greenish yellow shade. Under certain lights, it even looks like diarrhea, which is not particularly a good look for him. Then you realize they've changed which parts of the alt mode are painted, which under normal circumstances would be a cool way to differentiate. But here they've gone for these 4 tiny sections instead, leaving nothing on the sides. Sure, Kickback was messy, but at least there was some breakup on the sides. This not only makes it a smidge bland, but puts the blandness in full view. The shades they use for breakup don't even particularly work well. The silver blends in way too much and the gunmetal looks super out of place. It's giving Legacy United Metalhawk vibes, where the shades are good but not particularly appropriate. The layouts on the turret aren't particularly fantastic either. Instead of that gorgeous fade, they've just got a bit of silver on the sides, which is... Even the weapon integration looks weird. Something about the way the 2 colors clash just feels off. The only part I feel genuinely looks better is the back, because this new shade makes the diamond plating look a lot more visible. But is that really worth it in the end? Blight isn't a bad alt mode, but it just seems like a massive letdown after how gorgeous Kickback handled things. Though I guess that's part of the whole retool deal. One member is always going to be better than the other. And at least the 2 look pretty cool together, almost like drones from the 2007 game. Just in the custom colors you'd have access to. Decent design design, but a slightly betraying deco. Not terrible though, just okay. Thankfully, if you want visual interest, you don't have to wait that long. The helicopter drones bring things back with some really lovely aerial modes. Blackout dares to ask, but what if it was purple, with a truly delightful shade matched wonderfully with some gunmetal? Unlike Blight, the gunmetal actually complements the design very well, and you end up with a helicopter mode that's halfway between Machine Wars and Beast Machines with its shades. Going all in on the machines here. Maybe this is why they renamed Vortex to Blackout in the 07 movie, given this one was originally Vortex with the original intent, and also Soundwave, I guess. Maybe this hypothesis is full of shit. I haven't properly read the pre-production material of the film that was supposed to be a G.I. Joe revival. Get wrecked. Nobody likes G.I. Joe. It's got some great sculpting too. I love the angular cockpit at the front, even going as far as sculpting an interior on the inside. Love to see it, especially on a figure this small. Also, kind of miss this shape of cockpit. We don't really get a lot of figures using this style of alt mode these days. Glad to see it return with overgear at least. Oh shit, it's Blackout again. The paint that dots it around is also delightful. The window shade is simply divine, a shade I'm pretty sure is unique to the Kara version. It's a perfect balance of realism and cartoon styling. I love it. I also love how the panels on the underside fold together to form a sort of faux air intake. Great use of extra kibble. Capped off with a nice extra stone blue triangle at the front and some really nice air intakes, and you've got a wonderful cockpit section. It's easily the best part of this alternate mode, and I reckon they've chosen a great part to focus on. Of course, the rest is no slouch either, though it is a slight step down. This is where the Scout class budget starts to show, because those are blatantly legs and those are blatantly arms. It's unfortunately just the cost of doing business, and I think it's a decent trade-off, especially considering it has to combine on top of its restrictive price point already. I actually quite like the way the legs integrate. If the thighs were somewhat covered up and smoothly hidden, these could get away as boosters pretty easily. Fortunately, your attention is mostly drawn to the tail fin anyway, which is sculpted and painted pretty damn well. I love the yellow shade they slathered this thing with. It's got a gorgeous metallic fleck to it that really helps it stand out. Considering this is already on top of a purple color correction shade, this is easily the most painted part of this mode. Though the rest dots itself pretty well too, mostly with robot mode parts that just happen to look cool in this mode. You even get a nice sculpted Decepticon symbol, which stands out very well on the side. In fact, though I haven't mentioned it until now, all of these fellas have sculpted Decepticon symbols instead of the more common tamper-graphed ones you see these days. Well, that is with the exception of Barricade, which is kind of weird because Stormjet from the aerial bots had a sculpted symbol. So it's not something that's specific to the torso members. Might just be a case of oops for gore. It was mostly kept to the Armada and Energon eras, so seeing this is like a trip down memory lane. I get why they don't do this anymore. It limits what you're able to do with these budget-wise. Either you have to get creative about what you redeco the figures into, or put in the budget to retool the symbol out and replace it with something else. So yeah, tamper-graphed symbols make more sense budget-wise, so this is a fun oddity to look back on. This is a really fun helicopter mode. Janky in a few areas, but for what would have been $15 back in the day, I can easily cut it some slack. I don't really have anything meaningful to criticize here, save for the kind of shitty combiner kibble storage. This doesn't look good. It sits way too far back and doesn't add anything meaningful to the alt mode, least to the extent that tanks did. There is a form of functionality that is kinda cool though. Now, I'm not sure if you're meant to do this or not, as the instructions don't say anything about it, but you can actually remove the side guns from the center module and plug on just those and nothing else. And this looks way better. It does make them look a bit back heavy, but it's a nice feature that doesn't seem to cause too much damage to the pieces themselves, despite them being made of clear plastic. And yeah, that choice is dumb. But unfortunately, it just comes with a time period. Everything had to be clear for the component, so of course they stupidly chose clear plastic for the hands and feet. Still, I guess it could be worse. Way worse. But aside from that, it's a shockingly good helicopter. Everything else is really just nitpicking. Oh no, the Energon star gets lost under the propeller assembly. Big whoop. The propellers are too resplendent, so you don't notice the blue. What of it, Whinger? Fact is, this is an awesome helicopter mode, especially for the price. The only thing I really wish it had was a stand port, but given the time this came out, it makes no sense for them to include one. Everything else is wonderful in practically every way, so I genuinely can't find anything to complain about. So, what happens when you take that and make the colors even better? Well, what the f do you think happens? I can't be the only one who's been missing the inclusion of bronze in a lot of modern Transformers toys. I get that it's somewhat a difficult color to do, new, I've experienced such in my brief customizing stints years ago, but every time they bring it back, it's never quite got the resplendence previous toys had. And this toy really shows that alongside its piercing orange, rich brown, and deep blues. Stormcloud basically takes everything Blackout did and turns it up to 11. The cockpit is even meaner with the bronze giving the frame a weighty feel, reinforced with a more defined blue nose. Combined with the already cool as shit blue windows and molded interior, this becomes one of the coolest copter fronts I've seen in a good long while. I also love how the bronze continues to the propeller housing at the top. Really feels more grounded in reality despite being a primarily orange and brown helicopter. Also makes the Energon star housing a lot more pronounced, which takes one of my few nitpicks and fixes it. God damn, this figure's after my own heart. The brown and blue combo on the faux turbine thingies not only looks fantastic, but also helps balance the coloration of the figure. Sure, it makes the pelvis and thighs a bit more prominent as they're surrounded by anything but orange, but still, gorgeous. Capped off with the orange going to town on the tail section, and this becomes one killer copter mode. So yeah, this is just better than Blackout in every conceivable way. Not to say Blackout was bad, but this is something truly special. I basically love everything about this aside from, again, that stinking combiner kibble storage. But honestly, weapon storage isn't a necessity, and that's basically what this is, just with extra steps. I'd rather the alt mode feel complete without it than have one compromised for its inclusion, and this is very much the former. So no complaints on my end, easily one of the best Scout alt modes I've handled. And that just leaves us with the main man himself, Barricade. Damn, the first movie really did like to reuse names from this set, didn't it? It's not exactly an uncommon occurrence for the torso member to be the most compromised, especially if it has to rely on its own engineering instead of fitting inside a frame. In the same vein as the upcoming Nexus Prime, the focus on Barry here is put on the robot and combined modes, with the vehicle being the one thrown to the wayside. It's still a decent vehicle, but amongst the tapestry of Onslaught alikes, it's definitely got some jank to it, which to be fair is kind of emblematic of this set. It's very short and squished, to the point where the rocket launcher almost feels oversized for what it does. The front is the right size, but it feels like it belongs to a completely different vehicle. This sort of angled truck would do really well on a massive rolling murder truck, but is kinda tiny. It's like they put a leader front on a deluxe back. Also hilarious that his Energon starport is upside down in this mode, prioritizing the combined mode again. Also, annoyingly, the Takara set only comes with 4 Energon stars. Not sure if the Hasbro one comes with more, but it feels like a missed opportunity. That or my copy was missing, but I don't think so as it seemed complete. Not sure how I feel about the grey plastic. It's sitting firmly in the Games Workshop grey category, no matter how shiny they try to make it. But fortunately, in this instance, you don't tend to notice it with all the gorgeous metallic turquoise. It's a very similar shade to the Takara Universe edition of that standalone Onslaught that released a while later. Deep and rich with a delightful fleck to it. It dots across the whole mode, including the rocket launchers, well and truly overpowering the grey. You also get plenty of metallic lime green, far more vibrant than both the G1 Toon and toy. It's like the shade seen on Iron Factory, only way more striking. It shows up in a bunch of places, including ones you wouldn't expect. And on top of that, they've brought this delightful pearlescent grey in, taking the same shade as Legacy United Soundwave and MP36. It matches the base plastic really well, yet still looks far better than it. Kinda funny. And if that wasn't cool enough, they've even gone in with some extra green on the lights. Crazy hidden detail. They didn't have to, but they went the extra mile. It's amazing. The mechanical detail goes pretty hard too, though that's mostly due to, again, the other 2 modes. Still, it's really nice seeing the arm panels on full display, though unfortunately they can't distract from the head being in plain view. It's just sitting there. It's not even the combined mode head, it's just the robot head. I know Energon was kinda known for doing this, and there are far worse instances in the toy line, but this is still pretty funny. Not hateful, given this is basically a deluxe from over 2 decades ago, but definitely funny. I do reckon they should have had a couple of panels on the sides folding down. Maybe they had this at the design phase and either costed it out or found they were too fragile. Hard to say, only speculating here. At least you can cover them up with minicons, using the minicon pegs on the sides. Looks a bit funny though and locks up the articulation. Still, pretty cool they incorporated the existing articulation into this mode, to give it some extra playability. Barricade is weird. In the pantheon of Combaticon torso Dudicuses, is probably the most compromised I've come across, even compared to Combiner Wars with its alt mode that was basically a robot mode stretched out. and turned backwards. But in the context of the time it came out, and especially considering this is the equivalent of a deluxe price point, I think they've pulled it off alright. It's jank and easily the weakest of the bunch, mold-wise, not deco-wise, but it still feels like a leader and commands the presence of such. And they look pretty good as a team. Some of that is diminished by the fact you have 2 of each, instead of 5 different modes, but the colors do enough to differentiate them. And ultimately, I really like the vibe they bring. The Unicron Trilogy stylings remain timeless to this day, endlessly unique yet instantly recognizable. Most of all, I love that these aren't the normal Combaticons. These are definitely Combaticons, but not the traditional ones we all know and love, most of the time. They occupy their own space, and it's a very nice change of pace. In an age where the franchise is getting increasingly self-referential, it's nice to see a team that, while they take inspiration from what came before, doesn't necessarily rely on it. Anyway, I think that's enough for the vehicle modes. Before we switch over to the conversions, I first want to thank the sponsor of today's video, JP Fans. Are you tired of this constant drip feed of toys consistently disappointing you? As the quality of the franchise slips further into the abyss, have you ever wanted to go back to the days when things were more your pace? Well, may I introduce you to the wonderful world of back collecting. Go back and engage in all those times where Hasbro's creativity ran wild with the Unicron Trilogy, Robots in Disguise era, Beast Family, and many more. And today's sponsor is here to help facilitate that, JP Fans. If you've watched this channel before, you likely know what a freight forwarder or proxy service is. And today's sponsor fits right into the latter category. Access all sorts of figures across multiple websites such as Mercari, Yahoo Auctions, and Amazon Japan. No more getting screwed over by local prices for missing link. Finally, get them at a more reasonable cost. At least a little more anyway. It's another great service to help you back collect a lot of older figures you might be interested in, as well as a plethora of anime figures, vintage video games, and way more. All you have to do is make an account, pick the figure you want, and have it sent to JP Fans' website. From here, much like any freight forwarder, you can combine shipping into one large order. There are also plenty of coupons to save you on shipping, as well as sign-up codes. Matter of fact, if you sign up with my affiliate link, you can get a discount on shipping and 50% off your first Mercari selection. Furthermore, if you want an additional discount on shipping, make sure to use the code LOCK at the discounts page. Just right about here, you can redeem it right over there. They do tend to go quite heavy on the discount, so you can really save yourself some cash there. Once again, major thanks for providing me with this figure. Been wanting to own and review it for quite some time, and this gave me the perfect opportunity to. Anyway, that's enough from Sponsor Doc. Back to the video. There's something special about Unicron Trilogy conversion schemes. They just sort of have that tokusatsu element to them. The way each piece feels carefully planned out and full of power. In many ways, it distills a lot of what makes G1 conversions very fun, just in a more modernized sense. And I don't just mean modernized for the time, I also mean today anyway. Now obviously, because these are redecos of each other, I don't really need to worry about showing the conversions twice. Now I think the helicopters were far more interesting and complex, but it's actually the tanks that do a lot more cool stuff, so I'll start off with those. Also because they're sort of the bulkier components. First thing you want to do is bring the side panels out, rotate them all the way backwards, and rotate them out on the hinges so you get the nice effect there. Instead of rotating the turret itself, you go on this second hinge below it, which will allow you to rotate it all the way up like so. Bring down the feet or the skis like so and separate them. Separate the arms a little bit of the way, which will allow you to bring the forearms around like so, and then lock these into the place the rest of the way, and they click into place there. You can also rotate the guns down like so. This section will rotate down, the head will clip back, and the head will rotate around like so. And you're done, basically. I really like that the turret almost folds inside out around the combiner joint, so it makes use of the existing mass. And I also really like that the wings aren't ball jointed. You just know they would have been ball jointed on a more modern update of this, so this is really emblematic of the time. They still have ball joints, but in places that make sense, not just on really thin pieces. Either way, really cool use of a Scout class budget. Now, as for the helicopters, they mostly just save their engineering for the combined mode. Pretty much all you see here is that they fold out, but they're still pretty fun. First thing you want to do is separate the arms from the bottom and fold them out like so, and also fold out these parts from the air intake to make the better part of the torso. I really like a lot of the detail they've got under here. It's completely useless because none of this actually shows up in either mode, because it's either covered up by the arms or it's covered up by the combined mode, but it's a very nice touch, even though you're never gonna see it again in just a moment. Untab the legs from there and bring them down like so. Bring up the feet and they will lock into place nice and solidly. Rotate the waist 180 degrees. There's a very specific groove on this whole section, so figure out the way that's supposed to work, and then fold it all together around there so it folds up Blackout style. Well, I guess this is Blackout, but you get the idea. And then you sort of lock it into place with this part jamming between the two, the sort of tail fin. It doesn't really hold that well. I can see what they were trying to do, but it doesn't really work. Anyway, last but not least, you untab the torso, and that'll just sit on top of there, with the arms sort of locking it in place on the sides here. And if the head isn't folded out of there, well, you can just fold it out of there. So yeah, it feels like these guys are more complex than the ground components, but in actuality, they're sort of just more steps that are simpler. The ground components are a lot more complex if you actually think about what the steps do. Again, my real main gripe is that these just don't lock in place. They just kind of move around whatever there. But I do get it. You kind of want kids to be able to swing around the blades whenever they want, you know, swoosh and go, you know, make the noises with their mouths as kids do, instead of course, having the thing make the noise for you. Why would any company want to do that? That is completely stupid. But yeah, pretty damn good Scout class figures that do a lot with a little, especially because most of their engineering goes into the combined mode, and you'll see why later. And I guess that just leaves us with the torso member, which, given the way that the guns work, basically works how you'd expect. You can see where most of the parts are and how it's sort of going to work, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Interestingly, it's sort of got a similar vibe to the original Onslaught with the way everything folds up. I don't know, the steps do not line up at all, but it just kind of feels like that. Anywho, you want to bring the legs around and untab the waist, and that will clip into the torso like so. Separate the legs like so. Bring these front parts and double hinge them into the feet. They become the toes, essentially. It's pretty tight on those, weirdly. And don't worry, we're going to get rid of that peg. You want to untab that and then double hinge these down. And then I like to leave that out. I don't know if that's in the instruction manual or not, but I like to leave it out as a heel spur. But yeah, you just want to bring these out. I really like that they've used the sort of hinge system instead of the pull-out system. The pull-out method never works, so sort of seeing the Combiner Wars transformation is a very nice change of pace, especially for a figure this old before Combiner Wars. Anywho, you want to rotate the waist around, nice and clickety. This guy is all clicks, and I really, really like it. Untab the front section, and we'll just bring that to the back. Separate the arms like so. Bring down the head. We'll just bring the shoulders into place for later. Untab this back panel like that. These will pretty much just rotate on these double hinges just back ever so slightly. And you want to keep the head facing up, otherwise it's not going to fold into this whole section properly. But basically this just goes flush again. This stays the way it is, and it all clips together. There's one locking tab there, and there's one sort of there. And that all stays in place fairly solidly for what it is. Anywho, last but not least, you want to untab the forearms from these two pegs here. Bring it all down and bring down the forearms like so. I love the wheels on the elbows. I love that aesthetic. And then rotate around the head 180 degrees. And you are donezo. So yeah, very fun conversions for what we have going on here. Very tokusatsu-esque. You can sort of feel each piece moving into place nice and chunkily. And that is by design. It's the Unicron trilogy. It's the 2000s. Tokusatsu is in, baby. Did I say tokusatsu? What the hell am I even saying? Yeah, sure, tokusatsu with the pastitsi and the melamakarama. Yeah, sure. Regardless, really fun conversions. They don't even feel like Scouts. They just all feel like deluxes, even though only one of them technically is. If you're getting these for the standalone robots, you're gonna have a great time. That's not the whole set, and there's still plenty more to discover elsewhere. But, you know, for now, these do pretty well. While the vehicle modes held somewhat of a through line to the G1 Combaticons, that completely vanishes by the time you get to the robot modes. Aside from some of the colors on some of the members, these are wholly original designs. And once again, this set really benefits from it. Take Kickback, for instance. He's a tank, and he's green, but aside from that, there's nothing he really shares with Brawl. If anything, he shares more in common with the Insecticon he steals a name from, because they both have wings. Nevertheless, this is a really cool basic Scout design, design. Head sculpt is decent. There's not a lot to it sculpt-wise outside of the mohawk he has channeling Tidal Wave a bit. Given this is a scout, this makes sense though. They're not known for having the craziest sculpts. Instead, it relies on 3 things. 1, the paint. The orange face really helps this noggin stand out from the rest of the chunkiness. 2, the light piping. Yes, always yes. And 3, the guns. These are mounted along with the head itself, sort of like a light version of what Universe 2008 G2 Megatron does. It gives his top half something to do because the rest sort of slopes downwards. The shoulders are quite low, the wings taper out to the bottom, and even the guns make the forearms wider than what lies above. The further down you go, the wider he gets, so it's good that there's still some visual interest up here. As he gets wider, you also get to see more of the hidden details along the wings. They're really cool and go a long way to making this not seem like plain old hollowness, which I feel is a trapping a more modern update would have absolutely suffered from. I really like the dark green that reveals itself as the alt mode unfolds. There's not a ton of it, but it's lovely where it shows up. It's got this slight turquoise tint to it, and it complements the rich lighter green pretty well. The trifecta gets completed with this gorgeous all-spark blue. It's just a few highlights here and there, but it's gorgeous. It's even got a subtle metallic fleck to it, impossible to see from a distance, but a wonderful way to make this not seem cheap. Capped off with a smidge of silver, and this ends up being a really lovely deco draped across a pretty well designed robot mode. It's even well articulated, with plenty of ball joints giving you basically everything you could want. They even snuck in a waist swivel, which only exists for the articulation, not the transformation. Easily an element they could have tooled out, but they left it in, which is fantastic. There are also times where you're going to have to use the kibble wings to help support this lad, and the snowshoes are a smidge ridiculous, but otherwise he's a real joy to pose. You can even untab the sides to access a hidden butterfly joint, but I don't tend to because it looks really unnatural. And you don't need it or anything because he's already punching well above his price point. If I had one gripe, it would honestly just be the torso. It's a tad ridiculous. The turret piece just refuses to gel with the rest of it, sticking out really far, and not in a purposeful way. Combined with how wide and chonky he is, it looks less like a cohesive torso and more like a bunch of random parts stapled together. It's also kind of weird that the Decepticon symbol inside the Energon port is, much like Barricade's vehicle mode, upside down. Why are you like this? Did we really need extra faction badges in these when they've already sculpted other faction badges elsewhere? Did they need to double up? Couldn't they have done something new and different that can go upside down as well? Regardless, this is an awesome robot mode. Simple, yes, but not boring by any means. They put a lot into the paint and sculpt and given him a nice chunk of posing. While a lot of standalone combiner members can sometimes be a bit simple by virtue of the main focus being the combine mode, this one manages to sidestep that. Part of it's the deco, sure, but part of it's also the wings, the guns, the other guns. They've done remarkably here, and sidestep being boring pretty deftly. Question is it all worth it when you take away the deco? No. Not because the mold doesn't have any good qualities beyond the deco. God, no. No, it's because this deco is really bad. Legitimately even more sickly than the alt mode. The balance somehow makes the vomit even more pronounced. Like, the only part of the deco where I think they improved things is the torso. The gunmetal chest piece blends in far better, and the extra paint around the hinges helps it tie everything together far more effectively. It still juts out really weirdly, like what people think Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime looks like in his standalone robot form, but it looks way more intentional than the way Kickback did it. The rest of Blight, though, really feels like a blight across the land, spreading pestilence wherever he goes. They really go ham on the gunmetal, but all it does is make the vomit even more pronounced. There's some really cool applications like the waist and legs, but what good is that if it just makes this deco look this blech? You get a bunch of purple in a few places, which would normally be a really cool touch, but you just don't notice any of it when it's surrounded by everything else. Even the head looks boring now. The silver does nothing to stand out against the gunmetal. I really want to like this because the base mold is damn nice, but it's just not as good as Kickback. Even ignoring the comparison, this is a sickly deco all around and not worthy of the rest of the set's resplendent. Honestly, Blight is the one figure where I might eventually hunt down the Hasbro version. With the rest, I count myself really lucky I was able to get this particular version. Not just for free, but with Blight, I kinda think the Western release might be a better addition to make this guy look his Sunday best. There's a reason Hasbro changed this guy the most when compared to the rest. They obviously looked at him and said, nah dog, this shit's gotta go. Some of Hasbro's changes don't make a lot of sense, like the idea of not having the same color and the same wave and all that. But this this most certainly does. Guess that's another thing I gotta hunt down eventually. Probably why Superlink Swindle is the most commonly sold Superlink Combaticon on the aftermarket. Just glad I don't have to with the rest. Fortunately, said rest is genuinely lovely. The remaining members do a lot better. For instance, Blackout leverages his purple deco incredibly well. This is a gorgeous robot mode, not the most gorgeous of the sets, but he uses his Takara budget to fantastic effects. The gunmetal and stone grey are front and center, but unlike Blight, they actually balance incredibly well. Not only do they blend with the purple far more effectively, but it's all fixed in this one specific place, so it doesn't feel so haphazard. Positioning of the Decepticon symbol is also great, and I love how the transparent blue pops through. The head sculpt is delightful, all masked up with light piping galore. The yellow is a smidge messy, but you know what I've repeatedly said about yellow paint. And all things considered, especially as it's over really dark and rich purple plastic, it does pretty well. The light blue is also a real treat, and not just on the face. It dots the whole thing, providing some wonderful breakup. It plays off the yellow quite nicely in a hierarchy of purple, then gunmetal, then greyish blue, then yellow. The most interesting yellow application is in the forearms. They've used it to hide the fact that they're very hollow due to the molding process. Combined with the piston, these surprisingly don't end up looking hollow at all. Great stuff. It's a little messy if you take a close look at it, but you're never really going to be taking that close of a look at stuff like this, so it's fine. Articulation is functionally the same as the Tank Bros, so he ends up being surprisingly nimble for how big he is. Lots of folk get angry when Hasbro quote-unquote cheaps out with ball joints, and while yes, I do prefer swivels for their smoothness, given this lad's size, it's hardly an issue. Only part I find a bit annoying is how the waist locks together, which again is something they all do. But at least for the remaining members, it's part of the transformation, so it makes sense. Again, you can untap the shoulders to get a butterfly joint, and this one actually looks a lot more natural. But it untabs the torso and allows it to flop around. So use it at your own risk. Of course, the accessory game is a slight step down. Kind of. At a base level, this version of the progenitor for the hand-foot gun thingamabob doesn't work as well as that which came with the tank versions. It's very clearly a hand and nothing else. With some designs, that can work really well. This just isn't one of those, though. However, as mentioned earlier, you can once again disassemble the gun into 3 smaller pieces, giving him more traditional handheld weapons. Much like the helicopter mode, this works way better. But then you're left with the middle piece not particularly doing anything. It just gets left to the side, which is fine, but the other accessories were able to do it right out of the box. Why didn't they just do something like that? It's even more sturdy in combined mode, so it's a real shame they didn't do something similar. Ah well, it's really just an accessory, and it does nothing to mess with the overall design. Fact is, this is a gorgeous and super engaging scout-sized figure, and well and truly takes the bad taste of Blight out of your mouth. Or any other orifice for that matter. I don't judge. The only criticism I have, and I mean genuinely the only one, is the fact that the helicopter cockpit sits a little far out. That's it. That's the only thing I can criticize, and even then it's got a reason, with the entire combiner joint jammed in there. The fact the helicopter joint doesn't look worse is honestly commendable, all things considered. So ultimately, you're left with a gorgeous robot mode that just works really well. Not much else to say here, which makes talking about the next member a bit annoying. What the f*** am I supposed to say about this? It's basically Blackout, but even better. It's all the great qualities once again, only amplified. The bronze looks even more gorgeous here, and the blocking of the colors makes this guy look surprisingly slimmer. The bronze on the arms is a lot more encompassing and even crisper all around. None of that weird spray, just clean as a whistle. The blue makes much more of a statement here, dotting the legs and blocking them far more effectively. I love the inverted stripe on Blackout, but Stormcloud just does it way cooler. And you get extra bronze too. Legitimately, the only section that ends up slightly worse is the head sculpt, and I do mean slightly. The paint choices just aren't as interesting, but it's still gorgeous with the paints it does use. Well, I guess there's also the rotors, which I discussed in the transformation, and in this bright orange, they stand out a bit more, so the fact they don't tab in at all is a bit more annoying. But then you'd end up with them not spinning freely, which for a kid's toy wouldn't be ideal. Fact is, Stormcloud is easily the best figure of the set. He's the most well-rounded in both modes and easily has the best deco. He might just be one of the best scout figures I've ever messed with, which sure, a lot of that comes down to the Takara deco doing a lot, but still, they did a lot here with a little. They didn't use the doubling molds as an excuse to be lazy. They really used the fact they'd only be able to design 3 per team to churn out some really cool shit. that. And Stormcloud sits at the top of that. But that's not to say Barricade falters, far from it. He's a lovely closer to this destructive team with the chunkitude and density worthy of a Decepticon team leader. He's definitely a figure where he gets better the further out you go, because starting with the torso, he's okay. This is where most of the Games Workshop grey gets concentrated. The mechanical detail does do well enough with all those hidden pistons and wires, but it's still just Games Workshop grey. There's thankfully some breakup to hide things like the turquoise lines around the pecs, the midriff diamond plating, and even the wheels and the transformation hinge. And when you start to go further out, that boredom quickly dries up. The head sculpt is delightful with the quirky turquoise earmuffs and light pipe extravaganza goggles. They've gone to town with the paint here, even using a shade of metallic lilac on the face that doesn't really show up anywhere else. Looks lovely though. The shoulders are amazing with both metallic lime and tiny red dots shaping up the line work in a lovely dance. Also space for a minicon, as ridiculous as it is. Love the cross-generation intercompatibility. It's delightfully 2000s. The wheels being on the elbows is an aesthetic cue you don't often see these days, and it's always a real treat when it shows up. And with the extra pearlescent grey on the arms, they take on the appearance of armor plating. It was already implied in the sculpt work, but the paint on show really cements it, and it's gorgeous. Now sadly you get nothing on the pelvis, but the legs. God, this might just be the best painted part of the whole set. So much paintwork and so much awesomely sculpted mechanical detail. Shit's insane! I love how the thigh armor almost seems stapled on, and how you get lots of delightful pearlescent grey all over. The Rockapod's feet is also a great use of existing mass, and I really like how you're able to use the hollowness covers as ankle supports. It's a bit janky with them on the inner part of the leg, and I'm not sure it's even intentional, but it's a cool feature nonetheless. And besides, the inner part is the most likely corner to be touching the ground anyway when Barry's in an A stance. Of course, when you move to the back, you start to get into some of the negatives. Nothing awful, mind you, but there are things to nitpick. Firstly, the backs of the legs are super exposed. So not only is there hollowness, but the combined joints are just there. Ironically, it's far less cohesive than the literal nub sticking out on the arms. Still, not a deal breaker. What could be, however, is the solidity. There's only one tab holding the knees in place, and given the age of this figure, results may vary on top of that. My copy sometimes likes to fall apart, but on other copies it can even be a fool's errand having it in place at all. I'm sure eventually I can go in and thicken the peg, but it is something to note. Further up, the backpack is pretty egregious. It makes perfect sense. This is where the combined torso and head reside. Without a dedicated skeleton, or at least without the extra pieces, it's gotta go somewhere. And thankfully those two little nubs help him stand up reasonably well regardless. But it is still there, and it is still jank. In fact, out of all the members, I think Barricade handles his kibble jank the worst. It is because he's doing the most conversion-wise, but this is definitely where the cracks begin to show. I can't really fault him for much of it though, considering he's a 2004 deluxe figure, dealing with time jank and price point jank. Again, much like the rest of this set, he's really punching above his weight, and even then, the flaws aren't heinous given the size. It's like the Legends size, only it's not Legends. I know a lot of folks consider this a Legends combiner, but personally I find it a bit too big to be classified such. Especially Barricade. Articulation is once again great. The fact they've consistently been able to include waist swivels on top of everything else these designs have to do is insane. Remember, a few years later we'd have other triple changes, because combiners are essentially triple changes, using shit like compromised hips and weird arm joints because it was simply too difficult to do at the deluxe price point. And yet, this has everything. It's f***ing awesome. The only other criticism, and it's seriously minor, is that it's a little difficult to make use of the articulation without a dedicated accessory. Yes, unfortunately Barricade doesn't come with anything like a gun or a sword or even a shield. Not even another Energon star as mentioned earlier. Poor Barry can't have shit in Detroit. Again, I'm not sure if this is just with the Takara version or not, but like, why couldn't they give the main man anything? Guess this makes Age of the Prime's Onslaught not the only Combaticon leader to be missing armaments. Thing is, the ground members already kinda have weapons built into the arms themselves, so Onslaught can at least nick their weapons. So, I guess problem solved. It never was that big of an issue to begin with, considering, again, deluxe price point, and it's doing all of this nonsense already. Barricade is a mighty fine combiner leader, with some fantastic detail, awe-inspiring paint, and articulation so good it almost hangs mingles with the best of modern figures. He occupies the same space as figures like G2 Laser Prime, where if this thing had ankles and wrists, it would basically be a modern figure, and yet it still feels nice and classic in the best of ways. Definitely not an Onslaught analog, but that's kind of what makes him so special. And seeing this, I can absolutely see why so many folks were disappointed with the way Nexus Prime turned out. I get that it's more of a double homage, but imagine if it had taken more inspiration from this mold right here. At least a truck mode would have been a cooler idea, and it would have allowed it to stand alone, instead of needing to mooch off Silverbolt's caboose. But this isn't about modern figures. It's about Barricade, and Barricade is fucking sweet. And they make a really good team. Again, it's a little diminished by there being duplicates, but I'd argue a little bit less than the vehicle modes. They're already pretty great molds, but this Takara Resplendence really carries them across the edge. Except for Blight. Like, come on, this was a gross miscalculation. Still, if you need some generic troops to fill your ranks, these will do the trick nicely. Maybe not a standout Black Ops to f shit up, but definitely as nice, simple robots that fill out the ranks. And I am just realizing that the script said Back Ops, not Black Ops. I am now imagining Barricade getting his back blown out, which is not an image I expected to see while recording this. Now, most of the conversion here is based off simple and pre-existing steps that the others have already gone through. The only real exceptions are the helicopters, because they really hide a lot of their engineering, and you'll see just how crazy things go in just a moment. But other than that, it's pretty simple. I mean, you don't actually transform the tank components. They stay basically as is, so that's one less thing to worry about. I guess we'll start off with the helicopter components then, and just plug everything into the torso when we're done. First thing you want to do is fold in the head so that we've got the nice combiner joint ready to go. It would probably be a good idea to get rid of the guns as well. You want to come around to the legs and rotate them around 180 degrees. And then this whole double hinge folds off and comes all the way down to the front there, completely out of nowhere. It also unlocks the knee/elbow right there, but anyway, that just means you have to turn it around. You take the arms and you slot them onto the sides there with those little tabs and such. And I'm just going to use the box art as a template for how it's going to combine. So in that case, Blackout's going to become an arm by taking the hand there and pegging it in like so. Doesn't require any conversion. And Stormcloud just needs this in its vehicle mode configuration. So these will fold together like so, and just peg on the bottom like so with that weird nub facing forward, sort of bringing it all to place. I don't know how, but for some reason, when that foot goes in there, this whole thing stays together. It just locks into place, and it's just completely sturdy, despite the fact the legs are holding on for dear life. They don't peg into this part here. Granted, the foot really won't want to stay in place, which I'll show you in the combine mode, but still, for the most part, it's solid enough. The tank components don't transform, so you just put the combiner kibble on there, but you'll notice the combiner kibble looks a bit different between the two of them. I f***ed up for this. For some bizarre reason, I ended up losing the second one of these. I've looked everywhere for it. I have no idea where it's gone. For some reason, it has just vanished, and it's really unprofessional of me, and I do apologize for it. I'm gonna keep looking for it after this video is done, but this video has to come out. So I wanted to give a big shout out to user Total Madness, who helped send this all the way from the UK. She does a lot of great art and Bionicle stuff, so go follow her, and big thanks for sending this. But this is actually the Energon version, so you can see that it's a slightly different color to the Superlink one. Yay, comparisons, different versions, oh wow. It was either that or I used one of the pieces from my Revenge of the Fallen version, which is red, and it would have stood out a lot more, so this was kind of the best solution I could think of. But anyway, big thanks to Total Madness for sending this. You just take this little bit and plug it into there, and for the hand, you rotate it around into this weird claw shape. He looks funny. And Blight gets that like so. Nice and easy. And that should just leave us with Barricade. Legs should be the easiest. You just fold them up into their vehicle mode configuration. But instead of keeping these over, you want to just fold up the backs to lock them in place, and the legs, the thighs are done. You take the backpack and fold it out like that, just a little bit. Don't go all the way. You just want enough clearance to get the headpiece up. And then these will sort of sit on the sides of the head using their double hinges to keep it nice and lined up. This section will come all the way back and forward so that we can combine that properly later. But first off, you want to bring the robot head back like you go to vehicle mode. For some reason, I always forget this step. I can never quite figure it out. But what you want to do is bring these sections up. Forgot that they were on sort of octagonal hinges / ratchets, so that kind of surprised me. You then bring these around on their octagonal hinges, and they will peg into here. You see there's a nice peg there and a slot there. They lock together, like so. And I think that's why I keep forgetting how they're supposed to be, but really it is quite simple. Anywho, you want to bring it around on the nice ratcheted waist swivel. You don't see that very often. It's always nice when they have it. And then you angle the whole thing together. The head may end up popping off, like I've done that on purpose, but that's actually part of it. It's got a break point there so that it doesn't snap if it takes a shelf dive. When I had the Revenge of the Fallen version, I was kind of freaked out by it, but no, that is intentional. That is what's supposed to happen. And then you've got a slot there, and you've got a tab there, and it's the same on both sides. It all comes together nice and solidly on both sides, with that also locking into place. And you got 2 more tabs there and 2 more slots there from the vehicle mode, and that locks all of that to place, and you finish it off by bringing out the horns nice and lovely. And then it is simply a case of combining it. That just sounds like that bloody smart play from Lego Star Wars. And the foot fell off. As I told you, it's a little bit loose, and I'll get to that in the proper combine mode section later. So yeah, this guy, pretty simple. These guys, nothing to them. These two, really clever actually. Especially for Scout class figures, it's kind of surprising. And once again, I really like how Tokusatsu-esque these transformations feel. There's nothing quite like a Unicron Trilogy conversion, and this beast of a figure definitely fits into that styling. I honestly feel quite privileged beholding this before me. I know it's not that crazy of a figure, it's just the Takara version of a retail figure that released in 2004, but I still think this is the fucking shit, and I am here for it. Bruticus Maximus exists in this weird middle ground of old-style combiners and new hotness. There are parts of him that feel extremely modern, looking forward to the future, but there are also bits that feel stunted and super limiting, like they still haven't gotten out of the G1 style of just plonk it on there. And that's really what makes him so interesting. He exists in his own space, which outside of other Energon combiners, I haven't particularly seen any other gestalts occupy. Head sculpt is delightful, decidedly not Bruticus, and great with its own stylings. You get a ton of that delightful pearlescent grey, as well as some other light flourishes. The red pierces through well, though the yellow does tend to blend in a bit. Kinda funny how the grey is more resplendent than the yellow, but a pearlescent finish will do that to you. I adore the Darth Vader-esque mouthplate he's got going on. Almost feels like something from Beast Machines. And it's not a style you often see, unfortunately. I do kinda wish the horns were a bit crazier, but I get they have to fit into the torso, so it's honestly fine. Speaking of, this chest plate is really well designed. You can see why the robot mode ended up having such a big backpack. It's totally worth it when you see this chunky mammary section. Honestly, Iron Factory brawlers some competition on the macrodosing progesterone factor. The turquoise takes center stage, completely taking focus away from the grey and giving this guy a lovely deco here. You also get other details from the vehicle mode, which, especially including the yellow diamond plating, is delightful. Not sure why the Decepticon symbol is backwards though, especially considering it's facing the opposite direction of the spark crystal thingo. Bit odd if you ask me. The legs are wonderful, using the robot shins to full effect. Perhaps the waist could be a little further apart, but that would require an Iron Factory-esque hinge system, and I don't think they had the budget nor the knowledge at the time. At least you get solid ratchets in there, so is mostly stable, until you get to the feet, that is. Now, as feet, I don't think these attachments are that bad. They've got a reasonable amount of surface area, which is definitely more than I can say for the stupid hand foot guns from Combiner Wars we get almost a decade later. Hypothetically, these should work, but for whatever reason, the helicopter component refuses to stay in place. And only in leg mode. When it's a kid called Finger, it's fine, but for foot mode, it falls out of place super easily. It's why that toy guy tends to have the tank members on the bottom with the helicopters at the top, with the greater surface area of the feet also being a reason. Though, I'm not particularly a fan of this because it makes him very symmetrical. And I like my combiners to be more cobbled together with differentiation on each member. I might end up thickening the port or something. Undecided, but it's definitely an annoyance. And it's a real shame because the rest of the legs are wonderful. Kickback is, well, basically the same, so of course is good. But Stormcloud is surprisingly well-rounded. The way he flares out of the bottom is really cool, and to this day I still have no idea how it's able to hold together this well with all the moving parts. But it's solid, it's not going anywhere, foot aside, and it's pretty crazy. Do wish the blade's locked in place though. It's always been something I've found frustrating with official Hasbro helicopter members. At least have them shorten like Magic Squares did. They get so unwieldy otherwise. Unfortunately, while these work fantastically as legs, the arms don't really put much effort in. These are very much where those G1 sensibilities return, because he has no elbows at all. These are simply the leg configurations plonked on with nothing to give them some extra motion. The hands I can forgive, they look patently ridiculous, but considering the time this came out in, it's fine. But like, not even the elbows? That's a shame. And I mean, they still look okay. Blight is, again, just plonked on there, but the reshaping works really well on Blackout. Kinda wish the cockpit was facing outwards to give him some better definition, but they still look really cool. It's just, at least an elbow would have made this guy so much better. Not even a bicep swivel, just an elbow. As it stands, the rest of this feels way more modern than it should, even feeling like they could have dropped this as late as 2010 at the peak of Classics Generations, which is ironic considering 2009 saw the redecoed box set, which I do hope to cover someday as well. But then the arms take you right back to G1 and seem weirdly out of time. Now to be fair, this was really the first new take on a traditional Scramble City gestalt since, I want to say 1989? I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me, but I'm not counting redecos like Guard City and all that. And I'm only counting Scramble City style specifically. But the point is, they were basically building this new system from the ground up. It makes sense that there would be some jank involved. And yet, yeah, I still do wish we had some more points in the arms. It really would have tied everything together. At least the rest all works well. The ratchets are nice and smooth, while still holding everything in place nicely. I've always been into ratchet joints, and at least these feel better than Combiner Wars. Really like how they were able to incorporate the waist swivel from the robot mode. Really cool addition that I don't think carried over to the other two. I at least know Superion Maximus didn't have one. Now, much like Barricade standalone robot mode, this guy lacks any real accessories. I don't think it's that big of a deal though, because his hands, and I guess feet, are literal cannons. He's got the GoBot layout, and it definitely makes it work. Besides, I'd rather they put that effort into the core figures than dilute things and give us something waffled out. It's fine, and he's got enough other guns on him to make the rest work too. I don't extend that same leniency to the upcoming Age of the Primes outing though. While I'm still excited for it, a nearly $200 figure should come with at least something. That just seems like it's taking the piss. Now, size-wise, he's not actually as big as you'd expect. He's essentially a respectable leader class figure, and I mean old leader, not new leader. And that really works for him. Big combiners are fine, but I kinda like having smaller ones that you can mess with easier too. It's part of the reason why I gravitate towards Legends so much. They're just a more manageable affair. Beyond my nostalgia for collecting a bunch of smaller, cheaper figures. Though some of them certainly aren't cheap these days. Yeesh. I think overall, in spite of all its issues, I'd actually consider this a way more fun experience than Combiner Wars. The creativity, the chunkitude, the feel of it all. It's just a more enjoyable experience than the waffle rattlers we'd get almost a decade later. I realize the reasons are plain and simple: budget, gimmicks, and accuracy. When you base everything on their G1 molds, then remove the budget required to give them inventive conversions and solid construction, and combine that with a Scramble City gimmick that would probably work on a guy like Bruticus Maximus, but not on the CW Deluxes, yeah, they're gonna be disappointing. Blasphemous, I know, because it's not G1, therefore irrelevant, but honestly, this is a way more fun experience. It's not perfect by any means, but these are the kind of combiners I wanted as a kid, and of course, as a recent adult, when Combiner Wars first dropped. It's for this reason that I don't really want to engage with the Fans Project upgrades. I know the comments are going to be flush with mentions of it, but that kit was specifically designed to reimagine this set as a traditional Bruticus, and better fit alongside the then-released Classics line. And like, I don't really need that. I already have a bunch of Bruticus in my collection, and on top of that we've got Age of the Primes on the horizon, which is shaping up to be quite lovely, weapons aside. I don't really need another standard Bruticus. I like the vibe this has going for it on its own. It's just a fantastic standalone combiner as is. Now, admittedly, I haven't done much research, and there may be a way to give him proper arm articulation, hands and feet, without converting the guy to a G1 homage. And if not, I'm sure my partner and I can design and print some stuff when we eventually get that 3D printer we've been talking about. But even if I'm never able to do that, I'm honestly okay. This guy has his own lane, and it's bloody good on its own. Going into this, my saddest thought was that people tended to forget Energon and only defined it by what took place before and after, but in retrospect, that's kind of what makes it brilliant. Armada was adored for its commitment to gimmicks and chunky play patterns, whereas Cybertron more so added gimmicks into normally articulated figures. Energon sits smack dab in the middle. The gimmicks are the point, but more often than not, you still get a really dynamic piece out of it. There are elements that sadly fall short, but they are well and truly overshadowed by the sheer positivity of this set. It's not a perfect combiner. The elbows are a big barrier to entry, and part of me still wishes the team had gone with the two combiner idea where they all had different molds. As financially stupid as that decision would have been, product needs to be released, and more product means more money, so I get it. But I do lament it. And Blight is Blight. He doesn't look particularly good, we've established this. But to balance the issues out, the engineering is wonderful, the paint is exquisite, the mechanical detail is unparalleled, and the fun factor is off the chain. There are way better combiners on the market these days, ones that do everything far more deftly, but nothing does a combination like an Energon combiner, and of the few I've received, this is easily the best one I've come across. And that's kind of the thing I'm looking for with my collecting journey at the moment, with Hasbro going back to G1 obsession and not being able to get over the mental block preventing me from enjoying metal cardbots. Back collecting like this, paid for or out of pocket, makes me feel love for the franchise in a way I've missed. But as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on this classic system below. Does this old style of combiner interest you, or do you think the past should die, killed if it must be? Are you happy with these being their own thing, or would you prefer they be the same old Big Bad Battling Dudeicus members? Hope this video turned out okay. I'm still trying to work around the leak in the ceiling, and this interim solution is a pain in the ass. Not sure if I can keep this workflow up, so hopefully this will be resolved soon. Once again, massive thanks to JP fans for providing me with this figure. This is a release and a review that I've always wanted to have and do anyway, so having the opportunity to do on my own terms through this sponsorship was a real treat. And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time! And you wanna know the funniest part about this video? The entire production of it, and also the past 10 years I've owned this thing, I didn't realize that Superion Maximus was also the Takara version. This is also Superlink. So now I've got these two Superlink versions, and, well, shit.